Welcome, fellow explorers. My name is Christian Alexandersen, and this is Hemlocks to Hellbenders, a podcast focusing on Pennsylvania parks, forests, and great outdoors. Today we're going to be talking about a Pennsylvania icon that goes by many names: Snot otter, lasagna lizard, devil dog, mud devil, Allegheny alligator. That's right, today's episode is all about the Eastern Hellbender, the state amphibian of Pennsylvania. I'm excited to welcome Dr. Peter Petokas to the podcast. Peter is a research associate with the Clean Water Institute at Lycoming College. Thanks for joining the program. How would you describe the Eastern Hellbender to someone who's never seen one before?
That's a great question. If you've ever seen a salamander, what the Eastern Hellbender is really a very large salamander, up to 2 feet in length. But what distinguishes it from other types of salamanders you may have seen, it has a very flat body that is very, very soft. And that flat body and soft structure allows it to squeeze into very, very tiny spaces beneath rocks. Another very unique feature of the animal is that along the side of the belly are undulating folds of skin. And that skin is utilized for breathing in the water. But it also gives the animal the appearance of a very large piece of lasagna noodle, and hence the name lasagna lizard.
Do you have any favorite nicknames for the Hellbender?
The Hellbender goes by many names, including the ones that you mentioned previously. But one of my favorite names actually comes from German-speaking settlers in Lancaster County. They referred to this animal by the name Wasserhund. And Wasserhund in translation means water dog. Back in the 1930s, sportsmen generally referred to the Hellbender as water dog rather than as the name Hellbender. So water dog's kind of my favorite name.
How do Hellbenders live, hunt, reproduce, and survive in Pennsylvania's waters?
Hellbenders inhabit really large streams that are at least 30 feet across in width and larger, including rivers. Another important characteristic of their habitat are large flat rocks. Rocks you want to think of about the size of a car. And they live under these rocks for most of their life, and they rarely ever come out. It's an important characteristic of their habitat, but it's also not a common habitat feature. They also utilize clean water, and they require crayfish as a food source. About 99% of their diet is crayfish. The other 1% would be small fishes and other invertebrates. They actually reproduce under those large rocks, and their season of reproduction is a very narrow window. It's only about a week, the first week of September. And the male excavates a cavity beneath a large rock. The female comes in and deposits anywhere from 150 to 400 eggs. And then the male fertilizes the eggs externally, much as fish do, and then the female leaves. The male stays with the eggs as they develop. They hatch out at about 5 weeks, but the larvae, the young, stay within the nest with the male right through the winter, through October, November, December, January, February, March. And just last year, we actually found larvae in the nest in early May with the guarding male. So there's extended parental care in these giant salamanders.
What sort of water conditions do Hellbenders like the most?
Hellbenders require clean water and relatively fast flowing water. And the fast flow of the water tends to keep the rocks clean and free of fine sediment. So it protects their habitat, as well as providing clean habitat for their prey items, crayfish and other invertebrates.
Why are Hellbenders so difficult to find?
They're difficult to find for several reasons. One is that populations today are very, very uncommon. The animal has been declining throughout its range. Secondly, they live under really, really large rocks and rarely ever come out. So even people who live along a stream may not know that the animals are there. They're very secretive. And if they do come out, it's typically at night when you're not out there.
Are Hellbenders on the verge of extinction? If so, why?
Throughout the range of the Hellbender, which really extends from southern tier of New York down to northern Georgia, through the central Appalachians, and then westward to Missouri and Arkansas, virtually all of the populations have been in decline and have been disappearing. And we truly don't know why that's happened, but the decline is so significant that in Missouri, the Eastern Hellbender, along with the Ozark Hellbender, have been listed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as endangered. And several states have also listed the animal as endangered or threatened to protect it. But we don't really know why it's disappearing. We know that there are many threats, including loss of habitat due to excessive amounts of sediment in the streams, diminished water quality, water pollution events have occurred. Many stressors have impacted upon this animal, but we can't pinpoint any one thing that may have led to its decline. And there are diseases, too, that the animals had to deal with, including chytrid fungus, which was originally appearing as a problem in tropical and neotropical amphibians, has actually become a global problem for amphibians. We know that hellbenders have the disease. We don't know if it's really the underlying cause of these population declines.
I read that they were hunted at one point during American history. Is that still a problem today, or is that, do you think, gone away?
Hunting per se occurred generally during the 1930s, from around 1931 to 1940. It was a significant problem in Pennsylvania, but it also occurred in other states where sportsmen's groups misunderstood the animal, thought it was harmful to trout populations, and so they set out to try and eliminate it through spearing, by setting traps, by putting out trot lines to catch these animals, and they did. Actually, in 1 month, in 1939, they were actually able to capture and kill 800 hellbenders in a stream out in north central Pennsylvania. But fortunately, this hunting stopped after around 1940, and so the hellbender populations rebounded.
Do you think it was because of their appearance that kind of made people worried about what they were doing to the trout populations?
Yeah, there's really a misunderstanding by sportsmen. They considered a lot of animals as vermin: snapping turtles, water snakes, weasels, and hellbenders. And so they had this idea, we're going to eliminate all the vermin, and that'll solve our problem in terms of the trout populations.
Can you tell us about your work with the hellbender in Pennsylvania? How long have you been studying them?
Yeah, I began roughly 17 years ago, and I started. It was a fortuitous situation for me. I had arrived in north central Pennsylvania, and I saw an opportunity to work with an amphibian that I had not worked with before. And so I partnered with Fish and Boat Commission for 2 years to try to find where the hellbenders still occurred and how the populations were doing. And that began in 2006. And I continued year after year studying these populations, and eventually learned that the populations were not doing very well. And so I began a new initiative really about 6 years ago to try and implement some conservation measures to help bring hellbender populations back.
Why do you think it was important to designate the hellbender as Pennsylvania's state amphibian?
I don't take credit for designating the hellbender as Pennsylvania state amphibian. I can take some credit for helping students, high school students in the Harrisburg area, who were working with me to help implement conservation measures for the hellbender, to work with state legislatures to actually formulate a bill and actually get it passed by the governor to designate it as a state amphibian. The students were excited about hellbenders, and they wanted to do something to help the hellbender, and I helped them in that process. So they're the ones that deserve the credit. It took about 2 years to get this bill through the state legislature and then eventually signed by the governor. But I think it was a great thing for 2 reasons. One is it made people aware of this really unique part of our biodiversity in Pennsylvania. The second thing was I hoped that it would attract some support, largely funding, but also other kinds of support to implement more conservation of the hellbender in Pennsylvania. But unfortunately, that has not happened yet.
Of the species you could study, why the Eastern Hellbender?
It was a fortuitous opportunity to work with the Hellbender. I had done most of my graduate research with freshwater turtles, but I had done some work with amphibians as well. And I had arrived in Pennsylvania in 2003. And my colleague at the college where I work, Lycoming College, had suggested that I take his scuba diving course. And I said, well, why should I do that? And he said, well, if you scuba dive in area streams, you're likely to see hellbenders. And I said, well, that's great. So I became scuba certified. And for the first year of diving, I didn't see any hellbenders. But I wasn't discouraged completely. And I continued looking for them. And then I partnered with the Fish and Boat Commission to start this study. And so that's how I really got started working with this animal. And once I became familiar with it, I wanted to continue because it's such a really unique and fascinating type of amphibian.
Can hellbenders be found all over Pennsylvania or just in certain regions?
Pennsylvania has three large watersheds, Allegheny in Ohio out on the west, the Delaware on the east, and then throughout much of the central part of the state, we have the Susquehanna River watershed. Historically, hellbenders occurred throughout the Susquehanna River watershed and the Allegheny in Ohio. They have never been known to occur in the Delaware or in that small section of the Potomac in the south central part of the state.
Peter and his students from area colleges are surveying tributaries of the Susquehanna River for hellbenders. They are conducting long-term studies of behavior, population dynamics, reproduction, growth, and food habits. What have you found so far?
In terms of the research that we've done, largely through survey work that we've done on an annual basis, what we've learned is that the populations in Pennsylvania throughout much of the Susquehanna, but also through some parts of the Ohio and Allegheny, have been in decline. In some watersheds, the populations have disappeared completely. In other watersheds, the populations are really marginal, just a few individuals are left. And there's just a few areas where the hellbender populations have remained relatively stable and in good health and good condition. So we have been able to identify, where hellbender populations are still in good shape and where they've disappeared. We've learned a lot about, their feeding habits. We learned a lot about, and they do feed primarily on crayfish. We've learned a lot about their growth. We've done some growth studies, and so we learned some things interestingly, like that. Females get larger than males, and they tend to grow for a much longer period of time in their lifetime, which explains why they're larger than males. And the larger size presumably benefits the female because she needs a larger body size to accommodate a large number of eggs. And this is an animal that produces a large number of eggs, a large number of offspring, because the mortality in the larvae and the juveniles is very, very high. So you need to do that in order to ensure that at least a few individuals will survive, become adults, and sustain the population. These animals live between 30 and 40 years of age, so they're very, very long-lived animals. And you really don't need that many young surviving to sustain the adult population. But what we've also learned is that in some areas where the populations have crashed, is that there's no reproduction that's restoring the population naturally. And so back in 2014, I began taking eggs to a partner, and this is the Wildlife Conservation Society's Bronx Zoo in New York, to raise them for several years so that we could return these animals to the wild at a size and an age where they're likely to survive and eventually become adults. And it may take at least 10 years before they actually begin reproducing. So we're approaching now some animals that we collected in 2014. We're approaching now almost those 10 years, and we're hopeful to begin seeing some of those animals start reproducing in the wild. So we've really changed from just kind of surveying and monitoring now to actually implementing conservation measures. Some of the other measures we've implemented, besides what is called head starting, is to actually enhance habitat. We've done it in two different ways. One is we brought in large slab rock to create new or enhanced hellbender habitat. And we've also constructed artificial habitat structures out of concrete and placed those in streams as well. And what's very interesting is that this work is actually, of putting in habitat has actually worked for the animals. We do find hellbenders living underneath these rock slabs that we put in, and we also find them utilizing the artificial structures. So the artificial structures have two benefits. One is it provides habitat for them, and secondly, it gives us a means to access the animals when they're reproducing. So we can't get the eggs out from under large rock slabs, they're the size of cars, very easily, but we can access the eggs inside of these concrete structures, which have an access port. And we examine them during the breeding season. We can open them up and select some eggs from the clutch and take them to our partnership with the Bronx Zoo in New York City. And we've done that 3 times now.
What should people do if they come across a hellbender in the wild?
I think the best thing is to just leave the animal be and let it go. If you were fishing and you caught one on a fishing line, I would say either cut the line or at least attempt to remove the hook. The animal is really not harmful to you in any way. You can touch it, you can pick it up to remove the fishing line. So yeah, the best thing is to let it go. It can't survive out of the water, so you need to leave it in the water and return it to the water as quickly as possible. So let the animals be. They're very unique. They have very special habitat. They are a unique part of our biodiversity in Pennsylvania, and every individual animal is really, really important because there are so few of them left.
Admire from afar.
Exactly. And leave the rocks in the streams. Don't take them out because they're an important part of their habitat. That's been a big problem actually in the South, where people remove large rocks to facilitate water sports, kayaking, canoeing, and so forth. And they actually have had to put up signs and say, do not disturb the rocks because they are habitat, not just for hellbenders, but for all forms of aquatic life.
How can people either financially or by volunteering help restore the Eastern Hellbenders population here in Pennsylvania?
Currently, there's not a really good mechanism in place for people to provide donations to financially help our conservation work. We're working on that right now. And eventually I will have off of my new website a mechanism to allow people to offer funding. But if you're really interested in offering funding, you can also reach out and contact me directly. Some of the work that we do, in fact, placing rocks in streams and artificial habitat requires a lot of manpower. It's really hard work. And so we often rely on volunteers from the community to come out and help us when the need arises. And so by reaching out to me and providing me with contact information, I can certainly reach out to people who are interested and willing to help out with conservation work.
Sign me up.
I will.
If people want more information about what you're working on, where can they go?
The best place to go really is directly to my website to find out what is out there about the hellbender. Certainly searching online, there's another important website called helpthehellbender.org, and they have a lot of useful information and educational resources as well.
What's your website called?
My website is called cryptobrankid.org, and the reason for that name is that hellbenders are one of several giant salamanders in the world that are referred to as cryptobranchids. So I decided to name my website cryptobrankid.org.
Peter, thanks so much for talking to me today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome. And certainly anytime that you want to talk about hellbenders, I'd be happy to do that.
Deal. I want to thank my guest for joining this episode of the podcast. Be sure to visit our website and follow us on Instagram and Facebook for more information about upcoming episodes. This has been Hemlocks to Hellbenders. I'll see you out there. Hosting, production, and editing by Christian Alexandersen. Music by John Sauer. Graphics by Uncle Traveling Matt's Random Expedition.